I had a little run-in with somebody on the internet the other night, and I think that to bring someone who has been extremely close to Jimmy H. Wu, have him talk a little bit about Jimmy. A bunch of questions were fielded by Gary and given to her, and Sharon, of course, thinks it's a piece of cake, right? But Sharon has many, many years with Jimmy and has heard him talk about what is known. And the intent of what we're doing here today is to let you guys know what is known about the history of Sansu, how it moved through Jimmy's family, how he used to teach, how it's changed, okay, what some of the problems are nowadays, because we face kind of an interesting time in Sansu when it's being influenced by the real world and the pressures of the economy and, you know, coming up with fresh new stuff. And some people will do anything to make a buck and represent the art way. So what I thought would be very good for you guys is to hear firsthand, okay, not any stories, actually firsthand what Jimmy said, and let Sharon share some of the questions with you, and then we'll open it up for some others, okay? I met Sharon probably late in the game at Chuck Corey's, probably about 7 or 8 years after I started, and by then they were all history and legends. Sharon and Larry ran a school in Whittier, and then on Fairfax, was it, or Pico?
In Whittier, then Fairfax, then Pico.
And I knew how I knew how they had worked because I worked with all of their students for many years, and I kind of had a feeling, you know, like student, like teacher. And finally, I had the honor of meeting them. And when we began the new association, they were back, and they became an active part of it. So what we're trying to do now is to, you know, keep Sansu pure. That's important. And by educating you guys as to what Jimmy taught and what his ideas were and the true psychology, we can help to keep it pure. Okay, so this is Master Sharon Wikel.
I'm not going to go over there because it's too far away. So come closer to me. Some of the questions that Gary sent me, I'll go over, and then, but I like to keep it as a conversation. So if anything pops into your mind, feel free to stop me. Right now, the art has been in the United States for probably maybe 3 generations. Since Jimmy started teaching, he started teaching in the late 50s, and I started in 1965 in the El Monte School, right after it was remodeled, had beautiful red carpet and really ratty drapes, but you know, it's your school, so it seems so familiar to me and so comfortable. Even after the ratty carpet turned into a nice gray, and the drapes were like strings hanging off the wall, but and it stunk, and you know, and you couldn't use the bathroom, and it was that way until it closed. It was, you know, it was just the worst. It smelled of cigars, old cigars, and old shoes, and sweat on the carpet. I don't remember the carpet ever being cleaned, but it was such a wonderful, comfortable place, and I think that had a lot to do with Jimmy being there. One of the questions that I think is in everybody's mind is Choi Lei Foot and Sansu, right? That question came up too, because it's Choi Lei Whole Foot, and our art is Choi Lei Whole Foot Home. So that question came up a lot of times with Jimmy, and he answered it the same every time. It's like he was talking to children, because the question came so many times, and he can pat you on the head and say, no, it's not the same. The terminology is the same because words in the language are the same, have the same meaning, and it is a martial art, it is a kung fu, and our art is kung fu. But there's over 300 systems of kung fu and known, and there might be many more now, because in the beginning of martial arts, the Orient was undivided, was unseparated, and the martial arts began. So maybe one little idea, the martial arts began, and then say Ralph said, "I have a better idea," and he went off to Korea, and he developed his art according to what he knew from what he was taught, and also according to the people and the customs and the traditions of that area, and his likes, dislikes, what he remembered, what he was able to do, what he omitted, and that's how all of the kung fu systems came about, or styles. Systems or styles. Jimmy said style was what you wore. And he kind of snort when he said style. Say style, he used Kung Fu Sun Tzu. And so for him, they were all very distinct and separate. And of all these areas in the Orient, each place would develop a different style according to all those things I listed. According to the teacher, the likes, dislikes, what they were able to do, what they weren't able to do. And that continues today, as you well know. So one master of Jimmy's may have gone off and likes something from Hapkido. So he incorporates Hapkido into his art. And then another master never met Jimmy, never went to Jimmy's school, but he learned from a teacher who omitted maybe groundwork, or he omitted high kicks, or maybe some of the leverages. And that teacher then taught another teacher who opened a school in Montana. And so what he's teaching is still Sun Tzu, basically. The basis of it is Sun Tzu. Something's been omitted or something's been added. And the same thing with Choi Lei Foot. Choi Lei Foot is a traditional form of Kung Fu, and Sun Tzu is a fighting art of Kung Fu. Kung Fu means working man. Kung Fu, I could be a Kung Fu in the kitchen if I was a chef, or it could be a Kung Fu on the street if I was a road worker. So Kung Fu means a professional. And Sun Tzu means literally learned and articulate in the art of hand-to-hand combat. So how they say Sun Shao, the military art of China, is hand-to-hand combat. So Sun Tzu, in any art, is going to be hand-to-hand combat. So if you go to China today and you ask some old Chinese man about Sun Tzu, he'll just know you're talking about hand-to-hand combat. He won't know you're talking about this art, this combination art. To get any information in China, and this is what Jimmy told us. If you want information from China about Sun Tzu, you have to ask them about Choi Lei Foot, or you have to ask them about Daka. Daka is the combination of all of those things that we learn, all those families. DAP-GA. Oh, that was the second question too. The second question was, one article that we read mentioned the art was broken down into subfamilies. Chuanga, Chuanga, Maga, Sun Tzu. So that kind of answers that question. Our families that we know of are Choi Lei Foot, Hung, and altogether they're called Daka. The conversations that go on today, or the information that you see all over the internet and in some schools, is confusing because everybody kind of wants to put their own whatever to it, so put their own slant on it. And that's not new either. That happened when Jimmy was here too. And Jimmy was always here to correct it and stop the information from moving any further. But he's not here today. So anybody can say anything. They can tell you anything, and there's no one here except a handful of people that were with Jimmy. And they're the only ones that can say, no, that's not so. Otherwise, it goes wild. And on the internet, even if I write in the guest book, this is not so, you are out of your mind, I know this isn't so. That's just my words. It doesn't make what I say so. It just refutes what they say. But Jimmy isn't here to refute it, so anybody can say anything, and before long there won't even be that handful of masters from Jimmy to refute it. So before long they'll all be gone, and then there's no one to say what is or isn't so that knows firsthand. So then it becomes up to you to carry. You're the keeper of the art. All of the Sun Tzu students are the keeper of the art. So it's up to you to decide, what you're going to keep. It just like it was up to me to decide what I wanted to keep. It'll be up to you, and there'll be nobody to argue with you. You can make up anything you want. Why did Jimmy change, and how did he change his teaching structure over the years? Jimmy did change his style. I remember in the beginning it was very large movements, things over the head like this. You remember some of those? And very much like Frank Willoughby and Bill Holt who teach today. I saw a demonstration at their school about a year ago, and there was large movements, large windmills, and I remember those. Then he started tightening up, and things become closer to the body, tighter. Some things never changed. Some things always remain constant. That's the foundation, that's the basis of Sun Tzu, constancy. So even when I talk about all of those other people that have changed the style a little bit, even with them, I think the majority of them are doing Sun Tzu. It's still Sun Tzu. You know, maybe the history is a little bit different, maybe their style is a little bit different, maybe they've omitted some things or added a few things, but the basis of it is constant, still Sun Tzu. So Jimmy tightened up, loosened up, dropped his horse lower, worked on a diagonal, worked on a straight line. And I think all of those things have to do with, and I don't know for sure because this wasn't a discussion, but I went through all those changes with him. And I really believe that what they had to do with was Jimmy becoming a better teacher, becoming a smarter man, learning to teach American people instead of Chinese people with different weights, different body structures, and things had to change to fit the new society that he was teaching. And so there was a very distinct change from the first time he retired and then came back to teach instructors. What I saw then is that he taught all of the same things that he taught in the beginning of my training. So as I would go to an instructor class, there was nothing new going on. It was all really old stuff. And I think at that time, he was trying to reinforce the basics. That he's trying to reinforce footwork because he had let it go. They had gone astray. And he was trying to bring them back to Sun Tzu the way it was supposed to be, the basic part of it. And so as in the last few years of his training, it was repetition over and over and over of very, very basic things. So I would say that his lectures were the most fascinating at that time because he would constantly lecture people on the basics, and that helped reinforce everyone. But I always went for the hugs and pats on the head and good words at that point anyway. So.
Did Jimmy not like what he was seeing at that time?
You know, he didn't say so. He did say something, but no, he didn't like it. He said about one master that had been with him a long time. He said, "I tell him and tell him and tell him, he doesn't listen to me." And but he's my boy. He always said, "Good boys, bad boys, they're all my boys." Yeah. So he never, you know, there was a few that were disowned. They weren't his children anymore. But those people, you know, they betrayed him. It didn't have to do with anything other than they betrayed him. Some of the masters that kind of changed what they were doing, not according to what his instructions were, he didn't disown them. He still embraced them. And but he would always lecture them. But he didn't say, no, you're not mine anymore. They were still his. But what I noticed in the last few years is that he would, like everybody would sit down. There was a lecture daily. Everybody would sit down. He would start talking, and these two would start talking together, these two would start talking together, somebody would be writing something, and they weren't really paying attention to him. And I would see him shake his head. Or he would try to put a message across to them, and his English was poor. And his accent was powerful. And so sometimes it was real hard to understand what he was saying unless you listened very closely. And I would see him try to get a message across and know that nobody understood him. And he would shake his head and turn and walk away and come back and try it again. So, yeah, I could see that he was discouraged in the last few years over what was going on. But at that point, there was nothing he could do about it. Did I cover
what was his actual structure of teaching?
the way he lessons, like a day's routine? He would come in and everybody would hang around and talk to each other. And sometimes you would start working out, but most of the time nobody would work out because they knew Jimmy was going to have a lecture. So like if you were doing something I didn't like, and I had told you about it quietly, and you still continued to do what I didn't like, maybe you're showing off, or maybe you wouldn't move your weight right, and I told you over and over. Now Jimmy would have a lecture, and he would talk about how you never listen to me, and how all of you show off, and so he'd never point somebody out. He would always give everyone a lecture. Don't you remember that? Everyone would get a lecture, and no matter what it was, and then we'd all sit around and go, who is it? Which one's in trouble? But he never would embarrass anyone, never make anyone lose face. Never do I recall seeing him lecture anyone in class on a one-to-one. Everyone was all together. If one person was in trouble, everybody was in trouble. And that was almost every day. And I did go almost every day, at least 38 to 40 hours a week. I was consumed with this art. I love this art. And I think that's why I'm consumed today with making it stay beautiful and clean and pure. And somebody has to carry it. Somebody has to keep it. So we'd wait for the lecture. We'd all have a lecture, like 20 minutes. Then he'd say, work out. Or he'd say, line up. So either we started to work out a little bit, or we'd line up and do form. And every week once a week he would give new movements on the form. And you didn't start form until you were a green belt. And so then he would, everybody would be working out, then he would get a lesson, say white belt lesson, or yellow belt lesson. So whoever was in that belt class would come and get a lesson. That was after, in the very beginning when I started, he would come to me person to person and say, what lesson are you on? And I'd say, 11. 11A or 11B.
So they're actually specified lessons.
Absolutely.
Sharon, is this what became known as the basic 45?
Yeah, you teach us 45. For the first year, those were a one-to-one, maybe 2 years. It was a long time. They were on a one-to-one. So he'd give me 11A or 11B, and I would shadow it, and then he would show me the rest of the lesson, and I would do it on him.
You say A and B, are those variations to that
No,
11?
No, if there was a lesson with 9 movements or 8 movements, he would break it up. If there was a lesson with any more than 4 movements, he would break it into 2 lessons.
So for the 2 years after you started, you gave individual lessons, which means probably the first 6 or 7 years he was in existence, you gave individual lessons.
Yes.
What made it change from individual to the,
I think it was the sheer numbers of people.
how many people do you have when you started?
When I started, there was maybe 15 or 20 in a class, maybe 10. So small classes.
And then later on it got to,
It got huge. It got to where the room was, we had to take turns falling and moving. I mean, we had to look for a place to step as we made a block. So it got so crowded. And but we didn't mind that. It was hot, sweaty, and nasty. Air conditioning. And but it was worth it. And so he started giving the group lessons because the numbers couldn't get through everybody.
Was there ever a point during the course of his teaching that you would be allowed to create your own techniques, where you just said, hey, go ahead and create something
Yeah.
based on what you already know?
Right. What he would do is every day we did that, because he would give us the lesson, then we were encouraged to change that in as many ways as possible, approach it in as many different ways as possible, do it from a right punch, left punch, from a grab, from every kind of an attack that we could dream up with each other. And stay with those 4 movements. Then when we did our free workouts, then we could do whatever we wanted to do.
when you did it from if it was taught from a right punch, then you did it from a left punch, did you reverse your action, or did you do the same action just to a different attack?
Well, we would reverse it and do the same. So, to make ambidextrous. So we wanted both sides to be equally powerful, equally strong, equally knowledgeable, so that we would never favor one side or the other side. So every lesson was done in all ways. After the lesson, we would work out for a little more, and then at the end of class, he would have to lecture us a little more on what we had done or what he had seen during that class. And he had mirrors everywhere, and nothing, you know, he would say, I see you always, I'm always watching you, there's nothing, he's like our mother, you know, I have eyes in the back of my head, there's nothing you can do that I won't see, I see everything. And he would stand and literally watch us, the entire class. He didn't go off and sit down, he watched us, he leaned against the wall and watched us, or he stood over there and watched us, somewhere he watched us, or if he was sitting at the desk maybe enrolling a new student, we would see him looking in the mirror so he could see us. So we were pretty careful, you know, most of the time. But that was kind of scary. Jimmy was kind of scary. He was very intense. And you didn't want him mad at you. He did everything he could.
Can I ask you what Jimmy's focus was? What did he focus on when he was in the fight? Focusing on
I never saw Jimmy in a fight.
How about just in general? What do you focus on?
As far as watching students,
No, just so you don't get decked.
you know, I can't answer that. I don't know Jimmy that way.
Preach strong law.
Oh, okay, well...
I never saw Jimmy in a fight. I never heard him talking about a fight. When I enrolled, he said, don't ever throw a swing at me. Never, ever take a punch at me. Because I'll drop you. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you know. Never try to embarrass me in front of my class. This is my bread and butter, and I don't care who you are. You take a swing at me, I'll drop you right now. So, you know, but as far as a fighter, you know, I saw him stop people immediately with his eyes, with a young man.
I think that's what Lonnie's talking about, is when he was given a lesson, and would step up and go, his eyes.
You're talking about getting a lesson? Oh, okay.
Very focused.
Yeah, he didn't focus on anything. You know, like he blurred, he focused. So that he used peripheral, and we talk about that a lot.
Would he ever work out with students?
Never worked out with students. He would let us do a lesson on it. He advised us to never work out with our students. He said you make one mistake, he's going to laugh at you. You'll lose space, they'll respect you less. And we just didn't agree with that. All of us didn't. All of us worked out questions. But I know the point. It made him godlike. You know, it made him unreachable as far as fighting. He had no faults. So I understand that point.
I saw him do a video with Mr. Lassiter and Larry Michael and them on a television show. I watched it.
I saw that, yeah. In shows he worked out a little bit. Most demonstrations he didn't do a 2-and-2, and I believe on that video he didn't do a 2-and-2
No,
either.
they all came.
Right,
He
right.
just did the attack.
Yeah, you never threw a punch at him. In all the demonstrations, he would hold the microphone in one hand, as he did in that video. He never let his microphone go, and he was very much a showman. So he'd hold his microphone and he'd kind of move the cord this way, he'd have the cord this way. He'd move the cord that way, move the cord that way, so that he could do his movements. But he always held on his microphone. Occasionally he put it down, but very seldom. But no student threw a punch at Jimmy. I mean, no student did a 2-and-2 with him that I ever saw. I saw him do his techniques, but they didn't do any on him. So, you know, I do understand that because it kept him on a pedestal, and that's pretty much where he needed to be at that time, especially in the martial arts evolution. With martial arts being fairly new to America, then he needed to keep himself in an untouchable place so that cocky Americans didn't try anything on him, you know. Did I answer that focus
Yes,
question?
that was very good. I like when you said he defocused.
Yeah.
That made me back up, like, whoa.
I love this question. Did Jimmy have an inner chamber of students, and if so, did he share secrets with them? Well, yes, he did have an inner chamber as me. No, he really didn't have an inner chamber. You know, there were, just as some of you are closer to Paul than others, so, and you'll hang around when nobody else is here and kind of talk with them, you'll get more information. So there were some of us that were closer to Jimmy in that way. We kind of hung around with him and went and got his coffee for him over at the restaurant and had dinner with him and stuff like that. So those were the ones that got some extra information because it's just talking, asking questions and discussions and conversation. But as far as special students, I didn't see any special students. I saw special friends, but not special students. So, but if you ask any of the first generation masters, they were it. So they all would like to be in that place. I think all the first generation masters were special friends. They kind of just, because they stayed with them so long, that they became friends with them.
What did Jimmy do with some of the people who started to go off a little bit? I think Harry Wong got into something else and wrote a book, and Ben Kirk came in with some flowery phrases on the form. And when somebody started to try to attach it, did he handle that in a certain way?
He would laugh at them. He would. Well, Harry, he supported Harry in that book because he helped teach Harry dynamic tension, and he supported Harry very much. Harry was in class a lot, and Harry was, had dinner with them often. So he supported Harry. There were others. Gerald Okamura was totally cut out, and even today Bernie won't embrace him. But I was there when Gerald was training, and Gerald came. I think when I was maybe a yellow belt, and Gerald does beautiful sansu. To this day, he does beautiful sansu. But he made a horrible video, and there was a money disagreement between Jimmy and Gerald and Felix. Tony Felix. And Tony, Felix, and Gerald still do beautiful songs. And I would support them any day in their songs. They haven't varied, they haven't changed it, they haven't omitted anything. Beautiful songs. But they betrayed Jimmy. And so they were gone.
And this was for their own gain, that they would, their own, to show somebody their expertise. And that's what's unchecked now, is that people are starting.
What happened with Harry and Tony had to do with purchasing uniforms. So it really had nothing to do with anything bad about the art. It was a personal financial agreement and disagreement. So there we go. And I don't know who else is gone. There were a few. Woolsey. Woolsey. And I don't know what that was about. I heard stories too, but I don't know firsthand.
Did Dave Rhodes ever get a complete collection of the lessons? Do you know?
I don't know.
Not Dave Rhodes, Ron from San Diego. That was the only guy.
Oh, Gatewood. Ron Gatewood had, yeah.
He's got the whole collection?
Well, you know what? There is no collection. There were no lessons written except ones I wrote, ones you wrote, ones you wrote. So, my 45 might be a little different than your 45, but they're still the same. You know what I'm saying? They're still the same. They might, it might be a backhand instead of a straight punch, but they're all the same. But after the first 45, there was nothing after that. Those books that Carl Lorenzen wrote, the books that we teach from, almost everybody teaches from those books now. And those are just his record of lessons. There's thousands and thousands more.
I was curious about the videos, because Ron filmed every lesson for a long time.
For a long time, but he didn't film all the lessons. I was there. He didn't film. He filmed a lot of the black belt classes. And I have a book there with 300 handwritten lessons, and probably they're different than Ron has, because they were at a different time. Although they were close to the same time, my lessons weren't his lessons though. They were my lessons. And maybe there were some things in my advancement that I needed to work on, and at that time Jimmy would put those together in that way. So,
Sharon, on that topic, are you talking about the 5, what they
Yeah.
call black belt books
Right.
that the association used to sell?
right,
So those are just really someone's recollection of what,
right,
and in addition to that, there's no other translations of the books
Right.
that Jimmy taught from?
that's right. Just what each person wrote down. Jimmy encouraged everyone to write their lessons. Each person wrote their lessons. What those books are the lessons that were Carl's, and maybe, I think there's a couple of different teachers that have compiled those lessons. Most of them are Carl's. And, but that doesn't make them wrong or bad. They're good lessons, you know, and Jimmy endorsed those. And the reason he endorsed them was because there needed to be some record. And Carl was the only one that made a record, you know, a large record.
Sharon, I've got 2 questions.
Uh-huh.
One is, what's that book in that photograph up there?
Well, that's a beautiful book. That is the book. That is the book of Sun Tzu or Dhamma. It's one of 2. And
You didn't translate those?
no, they weren't translated. They were very old, and they probably belonged to the state of China, or the country of China. They probably should have never been brought here. And I think that's where they are now, although I don't know for sure. But knowing what I did about Jimmy, I can't see Jimmy letting those fall into American hands, even his wife. He had a brother in China, and he still had family in China. And he always talked about those belonged to China, and he was always fiercely loyal to his country, fiercely loyal to his people. And I can't imagine him letting those books be anywhere else other than China.
So, what did Jimmy think then was the essence of Sun Tzu? Can you rephrase that question?
Yeah.
If everybody possibly wrote down a different interpretation of a technique, what was the link between, what did Jimmy think was the essence of Sun Tzu?
Of Sun Tzu, the fighting art.
Yes.
Okay, so to fight the best you know how, to win the fight. I don't really know how to answer it. I know that he said that regardless of how you engage in the fight, you must win, but I think that it really had nothing at all to do with the fight. I think that what Sun Tzu was meant to do for Jimmy and for all of us was to build our character, to build our strength and our inner confidence, to blend our mind and body together so that we became fuller people, more complete people. And as the years went by, the fight became less and less important, and the character building became more and more important in the way that Jimmy taught and in the way that I perceived it, and in that if you studied this art, perfected this art within yourself, you never ever had to use this art. So if you never had to use this art, then it couldn't be about the fight. So I believe that it had more to do with the character building and making us whole. The inner chamber. Do you believe that the way we learn Sun Tzu is the same way that Jimmy was taught? And I think not in any kind of way. I think that the way that Jimmy was taught, the way he explained to us, he started as a very small child. He didn't even remember starting. He said he was so little. He started with his great uncle. He also started in a school, in a monastery. And it was, he said it was very much like a regular school. He had to learn all the regular things that kids learn in school. Plus, he had more to learn. So he said that he had to learn to inflict nerve damage. He had to learn meditation to develop his mind over body. He had to study physical conditioning, medicine, how the body reacts and how long it takes to react. He would tell us things like, I could make a strike today and have you die 12 hours later from a swelling or a hemorrhage. that happened, that took that long to cause the damage, and he would know how much power to put behind that strike to have that happen 12 hours later or 4 hours later or whatever was predetermined. And the psychology of fighting, he was taught psychology of fighting, which has to do with the saying that everyone knows, you can take my life but not my confidence. Does anyone truly know that, what that means in your heart and in your gut? You know, you feel it. To take my life but not my confidence means that I would fight you until you killed me or I killed you. That no matter how well you were fighting or how poorly I was fighting, I would still be in the fight. I would stay in the fight, and that you would have to kill me because you would never make me stop fighting. You understand what I'm saying? So I know truly in my heart and my gut what that means. I know that that's how I would be, how that's what would happen to me, that there would be some other power take over in my fight, and that I would fight you until I was dead. If anybody ever wanted to do that, I would fight until I was dead or they was, one or the other.
Did you try to incorporate the nerve strikes and meditation in art at all?
No.
Anything?
He taught me meditation a little bit. He didn't teach me fully. He just kind of touched on it. And I saw him deliver a nerve move to Larry Wikel. And he just kind of touched him on the back, moved down a little bit. Larry dropped to the floor. Just, no, he had no feeling at all. And it didn't look like anything, just like he was rubbing his back. And then touched something in his back, and Larry was paralyzed. So, for seconds, you know, not for a long time, for seconds. So, he told us that he taught us all we needed to know. That if anything else, we didn't need to know it.
So is that to say the art is actually deeper than what was taught?
Way deeper, way deeper. The psychology of fighting was done as a teaching. We do it. We learn it only through a haphazard way. We learn it only through our workout, and some of us never learn it. Some of us can be, you know, any level of black belt and still be afraid. Still have a doubt that we will have not the ability, but the fighter's heart to do the fight. You know, no matter how much knowledge and skill we have, some of us don't have a fighter's heart. You know, we don't get that. Well, he was taught to have that, and I don't know how that happened. You know, I don't know how those lessons work. But that was something that was actually taught to him. And so he was taught geometry, trigonometry, physics. All that we learn and are taught today from what I see in most of the schools are the two basic families, Toiga Liga, and a little tiny bit of Hoiga. And the rest isn't taught anymore. Hunga. Yeah, now we say Toilai Put Hung. It used to be Toiga Liga Hoga Hunga Puka. So it was all with the Gullah aspect. So the Hunga deals with the physical conditioning of the body. In order for it to perform to maximum potential, we don't do physical conditioning in any classes. A little bit of exercise, but not true physical conditioning. Dynamic tension exercises, along with exercise and forms, the use of geometry, trigonometry, and physics to help deliver maximum power, and also compose. They also compose part of the Hunga system. So we don't do that. The Budka is the psychology of fighting, the attitudes, internal power, self-confidence, proper breathing, and strategy for sudden attack. The proper use of mind and body coordination, mind over body. So that isn't something that's taught. You know, that's something we learn a little bit, very little bit through our workouts, but it's not something that is actually, okay, now we're going to work on this. It only comes in a haphazard way. Koiga is the study of it's the study and application of pressure points, pass and crippling points. By learning the vital points of the body and certain pressure points, one can direct the striking and balance moves of the Toy and Lee families to more vulnerable areas where it does not take a lot of force to control, incapacitate, or kill an opponent. So we learn a little of that. we know some pressure points and crippling points, but not a lot.
Did he always go by the book, or did he go by like concepts, or
His book didn't have lessons in it. These books didn't have lessons in it. They had all the rules and the laws of Kung Fu. They had the various strikes and punches and movements and explanations and things like that. Didn't put them together into patterns like the way he would teach. So when we would ask him how he came up with the lessons and forms, even the forms were not in a pattern in the book. There was only movement, individual movement. So the way he explained it was like there was a alphabet, a huge, long alphabet, and he would make words with the alphabet. So he'd say, first when you're a little baby, you learn a few little letters, A, B, C, D, O, G, of your alphabet. And then as you become more educated, you can put bigger words together. And as you become more and more educated, you can write essays. And pretty soon you can write huge books. And then there's no end. When you have the EDR, there's no end to the words and letters you can put together. So he said that's how the book was laid out, as if it was an alphabet of many letters. And he would put the words together for lessons.
That's why we can make our own moves up.
Right,
because
exactly.
we learn more and more.
Right. And when you have the key to the art, then it's a real special place in your mind, because there's never any confusion. There's never any question about what you're going to do for any kind of a situation. You have multitudes of things you can do for any situation.
his lectures were based on what, a reason for his...
The lectures were based because somebody did something he didn't like.
So what were the
And they might go 20, 30 minutes.
Why would he give these certain lessons?
The lesson had to do with where we were in general, like a yellow belt group, what we needed to learn. So like, say there were 10 yellow belts. You need to give a lesson. And there were 4 of them that were doing horribly on a particular throw. And he would make that throw part of the lesson. So he would watch us all the time. He would determine what we needed to learn, what we were doing poorly on, where we needed to advance further, and the lesson would come from that.
Sure. I'm getting the sense that there's an awful lot of Sun Tzu that Jimmy that would not teach. Are there any students of his that have exceeded what he taught them?
I think most of them. The ones that are active today, I think most of them. So, Jimmy came to the United States at 19. So you have to think about how much training could he have had before that, as an adult, in an adult mind, and how he progressed as he taught. Because we all get better as we teach. That's how we get better, actually. It begins when we're a black belt. We get better after we're a black belt. And and at the time that, as far as age-wise, at the time that we were becoming black belts and starting to become better, he was slowing down. And he used to say, ask me questions, because I've forgotten more than I've ever taught you. You know, you have to pull it out. It's like Pandora's box. You have to open it up to get the information out because it's locked in there. And so that's true. You know, all of us know that. If people start asking us questions, the information comes out. And if they don't ask us any questions, it just stays below the surface. It doesn't come out. And as we get older, that becomes more so. So I think that his black belts, because he taught us to evolutionize within our art, how to make more, how to make more lessons, how to make more technique, how to use our body, then we could only progress beyond our teacher.
I'm an old man, and we discussed the idea of this sort of thing. And he said to me, and this may just have been his interpretation, he said, it's not that I've forgotten more than I've taught you. It's that I understand what I do well enough that when you ask me a question, I can put the basics together in a new way.
That's probably very true.
I never forgot that.
Yeah.
You're very good at what you
Yeah, it
do.
is, it is.
And if that's the case, the question comes back, what are the elements of Sun Tzu that Jimmy pulls together in different ways?
You know, in Sun Tzu being only the fighting art.
It's not me that really wants to ask these difficult
Yeah.
questions.
Who is
Lonnie over
it?
there
It's Gary,
talking
right?
before class. Gary, ask Sharon these things because she likes me and she doesn't like you at all. What would the elements?
Yeah, I think what caused that to happen for us is that he gave us basics and encouraged us to use ourselves, and he always said, no matter how difficult the movement was, he always said, you can do this, everyone can do this. It's so simple, everyone can do it. And you felt stupid if you couldn't find the way to do it. I mean, I did. I felt just real stupid if I couldn't find the way to do it. He told me I could do it. And I believed everything he told me. And by the way, if you doubt your teacher, you don't belong with that teacher. you must believe what your teacher tells you. You must believe it's so. And so, as he would tell me these things, and others I'm sure, then I would have to find it within myself somehow, like learning a dance move, or a football play, or whatever it is we're learning physically. If you believe you can do it, your body will rise to the occasion. Your mind will rise to the occasion if you believe that you can do it. And so for myself, I would work it and work it and work it, knowing that I just hadn't found it yet. It wasn't that I couldn't do it, I just hadn't found the way to do it yet. And so because of that, I think all of the ones that stayed with the art, because of that, it's a feel that they have. It isn't that they know A, B, C, D. It's that they now, their muscles feel whether it's right or wrong. And so I think that's what he gave to us, is that he gave us the feel of it.
Wouldn't you say, though, that he took out the stuff that wasn't essential and basically taught us how to learn?
He taught us a lot of stupid things, too. You know, we would go, oh, that's not going to work in it, right? You know, he taught us a lot of, well, like those movements. You know, it's like he did some kind of silly kind of movement in the beginning that he discarded because it was so silly. But yeah, he taught us a lot of funny things. Gradually, though, he did drop those.
Well, I sense from the question that I'm hearing that some people are concerned that the knowledge of pressure points is gone forever.
I believe it is.
Yeah, and the question would that basically be what you teach an assassin? Is that really necessary for Sun Tzu?
He said, tell us what we needed. Tell us what we needed to know. We'd say, how did you do that on Larry? No, you don't need to know that. It's dangerous. It's too dangerous for you to know. So yeah, those things are gone forever. And so when we talk about the art and we talk about how much we know, my mind is conceiving the whole that we don't know. You know, we know half and we don't know half. And so we know Sun Tzu, the fighting art, period. We don't know all of Dao Kung Fu because half of it we weren't taught, we didn't need it.
So concern about the history of Sun Tzu would probably be secondary to a concern about a lot of the kinds of things that are not going to be known forever that were passed on by the great
Well,
uncle.
we don't need to concern ourselves with those. They were not taught, they will never be taught. It's in the realm of what we don't know, we don't know. You know, it is what it is.
Was any of this taught to his grandson?
No.
Do you know why he decided to go to the U.S.?
Yeah, he was subject to be commandeered by the Japanese army, the invading army of China, to teach Sun Tzu to the Japanese army. And his uncle and great uncle, his uncle and his two sons, his great uncle and his two sons, were ordered to teach the Japanese army. They made a deal with the general that they would fight, I think it was 5, I'm not sure, it could be 3 or 5, of the general's best fighters, in the Army. And so there was a meeting arranged in the square of the village, Jimmy's uncle's, great uncle's village. They came together with all the villagers were there, the Japanese Army located in that area were there. The fighters came together, Jimmy's uncle, great uncle and two sons defeated them and they were killed in the square. And Jimmy was next in line of the yard. So they smuggled him out. They changed his name. They gave him a fake passport of a dead cousin, put him in a cargo boat, and smuggled him to the United States.
You know his real name?
Shinsuda.
Who was killed in the square?
The great uncle and his two sons.
After they defeated the
Right, after they
American
defeated.
superior force,
Right.
the soldiers killed them?
Right. They're just those fighters. 3 fighters, Jimmy's uncle and 2 sons, great uncle and 2 sons, and 3 or 5. Do you remember whether it's 3 or 5? Yeah, it depends on who you talk to. And I don't remember exactly what Jimmy said. It was either 3 or 5 Japanese Army fighters.
So the odds were matched.
Right. Matched or a little odd matched. And so they fought in the square in front of the villagers and the army. And then they were machine gunned.
Does it seem like there should be something more to that story to you? And
I'm
this
sure
is-
there's
this
more,
is
but
why.
I don't need to know.
This is why, if Jimmy's uncle had lost, why would the invading army have needed him? At that point, kill him. But if they won, they have something that the invading army needs, why kill them then?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
Scared.
Just curious.
Of intimidation.
Yeah, who knows?
I'm assuming this was a fight with death.
Well, I don't know, you know, I only know what I know. That's the story that Jimmy told, that's all I know of it.
But he didn't say.
Well, you know, he didn't talk a lot about what went on in China. He told us some stories that were real amazing. Like his uncle great uncle, used to fight to the death in a raised ring with the spikes around it. And then they would walk out the platform, lift the platform, the 2 fighters would be on the platform, and they would fight till one was off into the spikes. And they couldn't stop the fight. The fight had to go until one of them was in the spikes. And so he used to fight those. He said that his uncle, great uncle, some other school would come and start teaching the martial art without asking first. Or asking the great uncle who was in charge of martial arts for the region or the village or the whatever. And the great uncle would then send one of his men over to invite that teacher to tea to discuss how much he was going to pay him to be allowed to teach in that area. And so then he would either refuse to come to tea, which case then they'd go over and tear up his school and tear him up, or he would come to tea and they would negotiate a price to allow them to teach. So it sounds kind of, you know, heavy-handed. But China, that was in the 1920s, you know, it was heavy-handed.
I was under the impression that Jimmy must have learned to rob, like the Chinese.
In that way, invite them for tea and,
that way.
yeah, and I'm sure that he probably did some bad things. Jimmy was a very arrogant, self-confident man. He was two people. He was very arrogant and powerful and flashing eyes and could just drop you with his look. And at the same time, you know, I knew a real loving person, somebody who was so generous and so kind and always willing to give whatever needed to be given. He taught me San Tzu without ever charging me. After a couple of months, he said, "You don't pay. You come, you don't come, you work out, you don't work out, I don't care. You don't pay me." So I never paid him again. So, and I know there were others like that. I wasn't the only one. So, you know, he always wanted to pick up the check at dinner. He was just a real sweet, loving man. But at the same time, I could see him get real puffed up and his eyes flash red, and he could just look at somebody and they'd stop. they go, okay, whatever I was doing, I'm not going to do it anymore. So, there were two Jimmys that way.
You know the full story on how he was
Of what?
killed? You know the full story on how he was killed?
How Jimmy was killed?
Isn't it?
No, Jimmy had an embolus.
Oh, really?
He died in his sleep.
Oh, I thought he was like shot.
That's Bruce Lee.
No, I thought Jimmy was like,
Dispelled.
I don't know where I was. We were talking about changing, inner chamber. We learned in Sun Tzu. Okay, so what was Jimmy like as a person? Oh, what do I predict for the future of Sun Tzu? I think the future of Sun Tzu is dismal, but I think that Sun Tzu will survive because you guys, people like you, will make sure that it does. But, it's Marlon. Hi, Marlon, come on in. Sun Tzu, is a divided camp right now today, and I think it'll always stay that way. And that's not so sad. It's not so bad. It's a normal process. And every martial art has done that. Think of Ed Parker. Ed Parker died. There was Kempo Karate. Ed Parker died. Then they become American Kempo. There's Kempo Karate. There've become many Kempo, many camps. They said, I know the world should come join. I do. And that's a divided area. And I think that is what has happened to Sun Tzu. There's nobody here to say no. There's nobody here to say that's not so. And the ones that say that's not so, so what? It doesn't matter. But it all depends on what you know, what you believe, what you know what your art is. And if you have questions in your mind about your art, then you need to put those aside and let them go, because what does it matter? Jimmy gave us the history of this art, and we need to embrace it and accept it. It didn't come from some guy that works in a Chinese laundry. It didn't come from this guy over here who told me because he studies Chinese culture. Jimmy gave us the history to his family art. And how can we dispute that? Even if you go to China right now, I doubt very much you could trace Sun Tzu or Daka back anywhere. There was a cultural revolution in China. All martial arts were wiped out. The ones that were teaching in their backyard, and if they were discovered teaching any martial art, they were executed. The teachers of China fled to various parts of the world. You go to China today and you start trying to find the history of this art, you're not going to find the history of this art. It was a family art. The books came with Jimmy from China. They weren't left for anyone to discover. So if you have questions about this art, I just want you to put them aside. Embrace your art. It is what it is. These other theories behind this art, philosophy, came after Jimmy was no longer here. Well, if these were true, why didn't they pop up when Jimmy was here to say, no way, you don't know what you're talking about, young man? They came after he was gone. So, how can you possibly doubt the history that the Grandmaster of this art gave you? So, I just want you to put all that aside. Embrace your art. There's going to be a divided camp from here on, and that's not going to change. It's never going to change. Just take it with a grain of salt. You know what you're doing. Is there any other questions?
I had heard some rumors that some people are trying to make Sun Tzu a religion.
I've heard that.
Oh.
Have you heard some of that? But, could happen.
That's just a reference towards the way some of these people have gone off on a quasi-metaphysical tangent view of the art,
yes.
which kind of, I can put it back when I first started 20-something years ago or whatever it was. The people would incorporate a lot of the 60s and 70s
Yes,
philosophy,
yes,
try to attach
yes.
it to it.
Yes,
Now it's become like that with
yeah.
my former contemporaries who have taken it that way, because the art is the art. I don't care what language
right,
you want to
it
put
is
to
what
it
it
or anything
is.
like that, but they've taken bottom line, it's a marketing gimmick. It is, and,
Yeah.
and they're packing the school and they're making money.
That's
Because
very true.
that guy, when I knew him, he drove a
Yeah.
Fiat, and I had to go buy him new tires. Now he makes $8,000 a month.
There has been discussion, you know, of money and making money in the schools with the different, when the different instructors come together, especially talking with Bernie, and Bernie demands that things be in a certain way, you know, as far as like when they were changing the uniforms to different kinds of uniforms and different changes that were happening. The different belts, blue belts, purple belts. So, and Bernie always wanted the belt ranking to stay as Jimmy originated it. I mean, Sansu never had belts. He changed uniform colors, but Sansu didn't have belts. Jimmy put belts to it because American people. And he said we need a little reward. We always get a gold star, or brownie button, or Eagle Scout button. You know, so American people need a reward to show their progress. And so he put the belts to it, and then some of the teachers said, yeah, but you know, we have kids, and we can't wait that long to change their belt color. They lose interest. They become discouraged. It's a long time between yellow belt and green belt. We need something in there to keep the kids interested. And so that purely is a money idea. And what's wrong with that? You know, there's nothing wrong with that, especially in the kids' class. They do need something to keep them going, keep them interested, and make them show them that there's progress happening. But as adults, they don't need that. But so little changes like that, when the instructors would come together, they would talk about, well, I need a way to make some money. I need to have competitions. I need to have this and that. And I understand that's business, you know. But that's not a need to change the art. But some of them have changed the art for that reason too, you know, for money reasons. And you know, they do what they have to do. So we can't stop that. You know, we cannot stop it. All the things that are happening to our art, we cannot stop it. All we can do is know what we know, cling to that, pass it on, and make sure we don't eliminate part of our art or add to our art anything that doesn't fit in with the basic part of the art, basic concept of the art.